Hello. Hello. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming in today to this session and viewing this whenever you can. My name is Professor Paul Yeates. I know you can't see me, but here's my hand. I've got my camera pointed straight down so you guys can focus on what is really important here, which is we're going to talk about how to go from a ground plan that you may have designed for a director into something called a white model, something physical and three-dimensional that we can show the director to allow them to start to see what's more the physical aspects, the traits are going up into the space so that you can also see how they fit inside of your box, inside of your space and all that kind of stuff. Today, we'll have a few materials you're going to need to follow along with this. First of all, obviously, you'll need a pencil and some sort of an eraser to go with it. An X-Acto blade or some other way to cut. X-Acto blades are usually the best. I've got a scale rule. Today I'll be working in 1/4 inch scale. And so if you don't know what that means, it means that every 1/4 inch on my ruler is equivalent to 1 foot in real life. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then I've also got me a metal straight edge or some sort of ruler will work really good for you. Any kind of thing that you can think of that would have a nice straight edge to help you. I tend to like my metal ruler. I've also got a pre-made model box. This is for a stage called the Lyric Stage. It's down at Utah State University where I did my undergrad work. And it's just kind of a nice little place to get started on in this particular thing. And then I've got some Bristol board. There's 2 different kinds of Bristol board you can buy. The first is the smooth Bristol board, and it's kind of got a smoother texture to it, and it's a bit more shiny. And the second one is a Bristol board, just a plain Bristol board, and it tends to have a bit more roughness to it. Either one of them you can work with is fine. Regular paper is a bit more difficult to work with because it's a bit more floppy, and whereas the Bristol board is a bit thicker, but it's not quite as thick as heavy cardstock. And so Bristol board is a really great tool to utilize to really kind of get yourself something sturdy as you build this particular model. So like I said, today we're going to work on building white model boxes. I'm going to walk through a couple of tips and tricks that I've got to help you guys kind of get this going. Now, this is before a color phase. Having discussions with directors and things like that. Model boxes are really important for them because it allows them to see the next step of visualization. They're not like designers or artists at times where they can't completely visualize it. I once worked with a director in my past that in my previous university that he couldn't visualize a model. He couldn't visualize a ground plan. Sorry, he couldn't visualize a ground plan to help him understand the space. But the minute that I gave him a white model and things he could see in 3D, then became something that was much more easy for him to notice. So what I've already done here today is I've created a ground plan that I've already got that's existing. I made my model box. I put a piece of white paper in there and I cut it out so that I can just easily slip this back in once we're done. It fits really nicely back into my model box space, as you can see. It will fit really nicely back in there. I've got it sitting inside my space now. But what I really need is I need this out to work with. And so I've pre-cut it out and I've pre-drawn a ground plan on here. So I'll lift this up a little higher. I get that it's a little further away. So on this particular thing, you can see that I have multiple different walls. I've got a hallway, some French doors. I've got a section that has a table and some couches in the middle. And all of my walls have some sort of dimension to them now. You can see that this first wall is 4 foot. There's a door with a wall that's 4.5 feet. You've got a bay window that's 5. You've got this other long wall in the back that's 14 and a hallway and all that kind of stuff. And some French doors. Now, my last step that I need to do on this is I'm going to label these walls. Labeling them will make it a little easier for me. I'm going to call this one wall A, and I'm going to write an A and circle it. This one will be wall B. This one is wall C. The big one is wall D. The bookshelf wall is wall E, and the French doors is wall F. Now, like I said, that's going to help me when I get into this process, just knowing what they are, because I'm going to draw them out on some Bristol board in a minute and make sense. The next thing I need to know, I know how big they are this way now. I need to know how tall I want these walls. And so I'm just going to make an arbitrary height, and I'm just going to call my walls 8 feet high. A piece of Luan or plywood that you might use to make them is going to be 8 feet, a 4 foot by 8 foot size of board. So I'm just going to go ahead and call them that they're 8 feet tall. I'm going to write that down so that I can know it. I've also got in here dimensions of what sizes these windows might need to be. And they're on the wall, but I don't know what size. I know that this door is going to be 3 feet wide because I just typically make my doors 3 feet. And so I'll need to measure now what size I've made these windows. So this window is 3.5 feet. And this window I made also 3.5 feet. And then this doorway, I believe is, it's a 4 foot wide doorway. So each French door is only 2 feet wide. So I'm going to go ahead now and move on to the next step. So now that I've got the ground plan completed, I know where walls A, B are. I know all of their different sizes that are on here. I'm not going to get me a piece of Bristol board. And I probably have a piece in here that's big enough scrap. I didn't check, but let me look. I've probably got something in here that's a big enough piece of scrap that I could use. Perfect. This will work great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slide my ground plan over here out of the way where I can still see it. And what I'm going to do is find the best way to utilize this particular space for me. I'm going to start by using wall A. And I know that wall A is 4 feet wide. So I'm going to find my scale rule. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to find the 4 on this side, and I'm going to mark where the 4 foot wide goes here. Okay, that's wall A. And I'm going to go ahead and label it wall A. And then wall B is 4.5 feet wide. So again, I'll put this down. I'll measure out 4.5. I'll make that tick mark. and this is wall B. Wall C is a total of 5 feet wide. So I'll find that tick mark and I'll make the next tick mark for 5 feet wide. And then the next one is the really long wall at 14 feet. So I'll find 14 feet on my scale rule. I'll put it down here. I'll mark off the tick mark for 14 feet. Wall C and wall D are done. Now I've drawn them on there. The other thing you might can find really helpful, if you don't have it, it's not the end of the world, but I find it incredibly helpful to have a triangle, because now I can line up this triangle along the edge and get me a nice 90-degree angle coming down. I don't quite know how tall 8 feet is yet on this particular piece of paper, but I'm just going to draw the lines coming straight down. Perfect. So now the next thing I'll do is I'm actually going to come down and measure out 8 feet on this particular piece of paper. 8 feet to that mark on that particular section of the wall, and 8 feet to this mark on this particular section of the wall. And then I'm going to take my triangle, I'm going to match those two dots up, and I'm going to draw me a nice straight line going across. Okay. So now I've got myself an 8-foot wall marked out on the paper. I'll hold it up so you can see it. Oop, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. So you can see wall A, wall B, C, and D, and they're all made out to match the 1/4-inch scale. Now, the last step that I always do is we're going to need some way to stick these into our model box. And so what I'm going to do is come in here and I'm going to make another 1-foot mark at the bottom of the wall, so that when I fold it in a few minutes here and put it into my model box, I have a tab that I can stick on or glue onto the ground. If you look at the back side of this particular model, it might be harder to see, but if you look at back here along this back edge, you might not, like I said, you might not be able to see it, but you can see how there's some tabs they've put down there. That's to allow them to do this. This model was made by a previous student of mine. This has been kicking around my office, so I pulled it out to use it. So now I've got all these walls made in here. The next step that I want to do is, before I cut anything out, I want to make sure I have everything on there that all of these walls might need. So wall A doesn't have anything on it. Maybe it's got like a picture. So if I want to go in here, I can add in a few pictures. Normally I like to use the rulers or whatever to make them nice and square, but I'll survive, I think, on this one. The next one has a door and it splits right down the middle. So what I need to do is I need to find the middle of this particular space. So if it's 4.5, the middle of that, I'm just going to call it at 2 1/4. So that's the middle. And then I need to find half of 3. So half of 3 is 1.5. I'm going to go over 1.5 here and 1.5 here. And so now I've got a doorway that's going to go up, and I know the doorway is going to go up 6 foot for me. I'm just going to call it 6'8". So I'm going to count out 8 on my little scale rule. If you don't know how to read a scale rule, you can probably find some information online. It's a little bit harder to teach you without being able to see it in the space or whatever, or find a friend or a teacher, somebody might be able to help you read a scale rule. Okay, so now I've put this doorway in here. I'm looking at this wall and I'm realizing that I didn't leave a whole lot of space on this side, and that's fine. You know, it's a Y model. We can make some adjustments. I'm just going to add in a couple more lines to make a bit of bit of molding along the outside of it, and then maybe a few details on the doorway, on the door itself. And again, this is your door, this is your set, so you're going to do whatever you want with it. I just happen to want some detail on this particular door over here. I'm going to add a kick plate on the bottom and a door handle roughly in here. I'm going to give these a bit more depth. And again, this is a Y model. It's meant to just be something quick and easy, quick and dirty, even if you want to call it that. It's just meant to give the director a bit of sense of how the space is beginning to look and how you visualize this set looking. So I've kind of thrown in a bit of a doorway on that particular wall now. Okay. Wall C has a window. So I need to come up and find an arbitrary height that I want to go with. I'm just going to go ahead and say this window is going to start at 2 feet tall, or at 2 feet high, sorry, off the ground. And I'm going to make it a 2 foot tall window. So basically there's that. And then I'm going to come over and make it another 2 feet wide. Now I'm going to go 3 feet wide. So it's 3 feet wide by 4 feet tall. I'm going to connect those dots and make that window. Again, I'm going to put maybe a little bit of trim around this particular window just to give it some depth. And on the bottom, it's got a bit of a sill to it. And then on the inside, I'm going to split the window down the middle. We're pretty close to roughly the middle. Again, it's a white model. It's not meant to be perfect. If you are a perfectionist, you can measure it out. And maybe you are. But for this particular exercise, I'm just going to hurry and rough it in. So I've got a bit of a window in there now. Now, wall D also has a window, and I think I'll just go with the exact same size of a window just to keep it for the sake of keeping it organized. So I made this one 4 feet. So I'm going to make this one 4 feet as well. There's 4 feet that way. We're also going to go up 4 feet tall. And I've just squared off the top of my windows. I didn't do anything fancy. You can do curved windows. You can do all sorts of stuff. Again, this is your design and your style of what you want. So you're going to make up this window and these doors however you want. You don't have to follow exactly what I've done because your model won't be the exact same way. Roughly split it down the middle. You would have done your research by now to figure out what you want anyway. I'm going to hold this up for you now. As you can see, I've got walls A, B, C, and D. They're practically now done, except for what I want to do now is add maybe a little bit of ground, not a ground rail, but a kick board at the bottom. And so if I just find, I can measure it out if I want, or I can just put my ruler on here and just go to town, drawing one solid line all the way across it, except for where the door is, because obviously the door wouldn't have that baseboard molding on the bottom of it. I'm also going to go ahead and do a little bit of molding along the top edge too, some crown molding. And the way that I do that is I just put the ruler on here. So I should probably delete A, B, and C from here now. I say delete, but I mean right, erase it. And I can put it actually now down here on their tab that I've drawn. Because now I'm going to add some crown molding onto these. So what I do with crown molding is I just take my ruler and just go all the way across the entire thing, giving it depth and dimension. Just draw a few straight lines. It gives the illusion that there's some molding. You could get a bit more detailed and you could cut out thin strips of paper and glue them on there. I'm not going to get that involved with this particular model today, but I have done it in many models past where I actually cut out a thin piece of paper, glue it on there, and give it some dimension and some depth. If I'm really going detailed with this model, like I might potentially turn this model into my final color model, I would probably do that. So let me hold it up for you one more time. So as you can see, we can now get this illusion that there's some baseboard and some molding. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut these 4 walls out. So that would be A, B, C, and D. So that's all of these walls. Now, I'm going to keep them all together, and you'll see why in just a minute. I'm going to leave E by itself, and I'm going to have to do F by itself too, because they're completely kind of separate walls. So what I'm going to do at this point in time is I'm going to cut out this wall. We're making great time. It's only 9:15. I'm going to take my X-Acto blade, go down the far edge, cut all the way through the Bristol board so that I can cut this whole thing out. Now to the bottom where my tab goes, cut all the way through the Bristol board so that you can remove it completely. So now what I should have in my hand is just the 4 walls that I've just drawn. Okay, so now while it's in one solid form, what I'm going to do at this point in time is I'm going to cut through the 3 edges of the door. One, that edge, because that's where it's opening. The bottom edge, obviously, because it's not attached to the floor, and the top edge. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something called scoring. So if I have this piece of Bristol board, where's my camera? Bristol board right here. This is my piece of Bristol board. Scoring is where you cut half of the paper. So it's just a thin, quick, easy cut. It doesn't go all the way through. As you can maybe see, I know it gets a little dark up here, but you can kind of see where I cut it. If I fold it now, the paper still stays together on the backside because the cut has not gone all the way through. So that's called scoring. So whatever side you score, you want to fold it the opposite direction. So if I want my door to open backwards, I'm going to score along this edge that's attached to the wall over here. So then what I can do is fold my door open, and I can have the door represented as an opening space, okay? And if I wanted to go through, and if I really had more detail in my windows, I could go through and cut them out, but I'm not going to do this for this project. I have done that. I'll show you an example of a white model here as soon as I'm done. That's really kind of involved and things like that. So, and here's, oh, I can show you this one right now. This is a gazebo that I had made for A Midsummer Night's Dream, the show we did last fall. You can kind of see how I went through and I cut out all those little details on the insides of those particular spaces. And so you can get super detailed with your windows, or you could just give a generic representation. If it's the first phase of your white model, a simple generic representation might be just fine for what you need. So the last thing I'm going to do now, sorry, not the last, but the next thing is right here on our tabs on the bottom where we have the divisions between the walls. I'm going to cut through all of those so that they're not connected together anymore. And then what I'm going to do is, because I want to fold them going this way, I'm going to score along the front of all of those tabs. Just do a quick score. Again, you're not pushing with all of your force when you're scoring, because you want the paper still attached. You want it to be able to fold. Okay, so what I've done now is I've folded all of those back and I've scored them. So now what I'm going to do is figure out how I need to score these papers. Remember, if you score on this side, you want to bend it the opposite way. So wall A wants to sit this way, and then wall B wants to bend in. So I'm actually going to need to score this side between wall A and wall B. I just lightly scored it. Now I can bend it. So now with my tabs, I might need to cut a little extra out so that they don't overlap. And I usually can just cut a little bit of a triangle off the corner of those tabs. I'll just go ahead, hurry and do all of that right now, so that when you bend them back and overlap. So what I can see now is wall A is fitting in, wall B is following that method. Now I need to fold this wall this way. So what I need to do is score the back side of this paper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little tick mark on the bottom here and a little tick mark at the top, so that when I flip this over, I can see where these two tick marks are, and I can line up my middle ruler and lightly score the backside. And that way I've gone along that edge of the wall. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to score, I've scored it, and I'm going to bend it in the appropriate direction. So we can start to see now how these walls are beginning to take shape. And the same thing with this one. I need to score the backside of it because it's folding in this direction. So 1, 2. And then I will put this here and I'll score. So that I can then bend it forward. So now I've got all of these walls designed in a way where I could now essentially glue them down to my ground plan, which I will do right now. I've got myself some glue. This one's purple, but it dries white. Not that it matters. I'm going to go ahead and put the tab. I'm going to glue the tab on the pieces that I've got. I cut the tab off of the doorway below because it was just kind of hanging there. So now what I can do is with this glue, I can now put it down. And I might need to hold it for just a minute to get it to stay in the right spot. But as soon as that glue gets a good hold, I can let it go and move on to the next phase. Now, okay, good. We'll let that glue dry while I do the next section. So wall E and wall F, they are attached, but it's not going to be really simple to put them together. So I'm just going to have to make wall E by itself. It's a 13-foot long wall. So I'm going to see if I've even got enough paper on here to do that. or if I need to bump it down. 13, I can definitely do 13 feet on this one. Okay, so I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna find and measure my 13-foot mark from there. And then again, so this one is also, excuse me, gonna stay at 8 feet. I'm gonna come down. Once I find that 8-foot mark, I'm actually just gonna go ahead and add 9 into it right now. So instead of 8, it's now 9. Find the individual mark. Oh, dang, I went too far. Okay, so, and I could have gone off of my previous marks on my paper if I really needed to. I do apologize that it's so far away, but in order to get the full scope of this whole thing, I had to keep the phone up there a little higher. Okay, so I've got this huge wall on here. Okay, whoop. Oh man, I keep losing my camera. There it is, got that. Now, if you look at my ground plan, I'll hold it back up for you. If you look at my ground plan here, I've got a bookshelf that's labeled here. So I probably don't really need to put anything on this wall as far as decor goes, because I'm gonna have a big giant bookshelf that sits in front of it. All I'm gonna do at this point in time now is cut this wall out. And once I get to the far edge of the paper, usually I'll just cut a nice straight line and cut the whole thing off. Because I don't want to have to deal with trying to figure out where my straight lines are or continuations of straight lines later. Okay, done that. I'm going to label it wall E. And I'm going to score along the bottom edge where the tab goes. I'm going to fold it back. Perfect. So now I've got my wall there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and glue that one onto my ground plan that I put together. All right. Drop this back over here so you guys can see me. I'm going to go ahead and put wall E in right now. Great. It's going to want to bend forward a little bit, but as soon as I get wall F done here in a minute, that'll help straighten it up. So wall F is an 8-foot long wall. I'm going to come back to my paper, my 1/4 inch marking stick. I'm going to find where 8 feet needs to go, and I'm going to make a line. So I know where my 8-foot mark needs to go now. And the other way you could do it instead of a triangle is go down a little further and mark it, and then connect the 2 dots like I just did. Okay, now this wall also wants to be 8 feet tall. So now I need to find that measurement. And I will connect the dots. Okay, I need to add on my tab along the bottom. So I'm going to add in that 1-foot tab there and a 1-foot tab here. Okay. Now, what I also need to now take into account is this wall needs not only a tab on the bottom, but it's going to need a tab on this one side to connect to wall E to help hold them together. So what I actually need to do now is add 1 more foot onto here. Okay, and then I'll connect the dots, go down. I'm going to extend out my tab. And then I'm actually going to just erase this particular line along the edge here. It's going to go away. And now I need to actually put the tab. I should have thought about this ahead of time, so I could have drawn my 1-foot tab in already on the side. And most of you are probably going, man, I would have done that already. All right, cool. So now I've got my 1-foot tab on that side. The wall itself is 8 feet long, like it's listed on my ground plan. I got to get the French doors in there now, though. So if I find the half mark of this wall and I come over 2 feet and over 2 feet, I've now marked out my French door. Okay, finding the middle of the wall over here. Come over 2 feet from either side. Those are the French doors. So I can connect those dots to make the division lines between all the different French doors. Now I got to give them a height. The last ones we did were 6'8", so I'm going to go ahead and make these ones 6'8" too. I've got some really nice French doors on here now. I'll go add in a little bit of molding around the side. One. Molding on this side. Molding along the top. Trim, whatever you want to call it. Probably more of a trim around a door. Could be molding though. Now, oh, you know what I forgot to do is I forgot to put my crown molding on the other one, and now I've already attached it. So now that's going to be harder for me to go back in and draw crown molding on it later. I can do it on the edge of my table just because I can. I have that ability on the edge of my table. I'm going to redo that real quick. You know, actually, I'm not going to worry about it. But I can go back and add my crown molding in on this one. These walls are only 8 feet tall. They're not really tall. So normally in a real life show, I'd probably do something a little taller, but I forgot, so that's okay. This is a demo. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add in some detail on the particular door where the doors are meeting together. Insert ideas of handles. And then I'm going to come in here and give them this diagonal diamond shape. It's called diapering. It's a pattern called diapering. But it would be essentially diamond-shaped panes of glass that would be inside these French doors. Okay, so now I want my French doors to open. So I'm going to have to cut along the bottom edge, if you remember that. Cut along the bottom edge and the top edge. That one. All the way through. And then because these are double doors, I'm going to cut down the middle. Now, I'm going to score the far edge over here and the far edge over here. And I can push them open and they'll appear as if they can open up. Okay. And then the last step I'm going to do now, there's no other detail I need to add. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut this door out. One. Oh, come on. And two. Okay. Now I need to score along the bottom edge where the tab is. Okay. Now I need to double check. I need to cut along here completely because I need that tab and this tab to be separate from each other. I'm going to cut out that whole little square piece. So that one's folded correctly, and this one needs to fold back. So I need to score the front side of it. Remember, whatever side you score is going to fold into the opposite direction. Right. Okay, so now my next step is just to simply add the glue along the bottom and this side. And I come back to my ground plan. I'm going to go ahead and plop this in here. Into the right space where it's supposed to go, and let wall E come up to it and touch it so that they can glue together. Great. Now, they're not always perfect, and you might have like this wall here with the door wants to tend to lean a little backwards. If you need to add a stiffener paper, you can, but it's usually pretty okay for a wide model. All right, so now there's more things that I need to add to this. I've got a table and a couch and a bookshelf, and there's lots of ways to cut them out with Bristol board. Also, you can 3D print any of this stuff nowadays if you know how to use that technology. And so there's lots of things. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to build a bookshelf. So I'm going to have to teach you how to break down ideas of how a three-dimensional object has to then lay out in the space broken down into pieces. So the first thing I'm going to do is approach the bookshelf and figure out how big it needs to be. On the paper, it's probably about this long, okay? And then I'm going to just go ahead and say, if it's that long, maybe I want the bookshelf to be, if my wall is 8 feet tall, maybe I just want the bookshelf to be 6 feet. So I'll come up here and do 6 feet on both sides. And this is 3.5. So if I come over here and go 3.5, I got my angle off a little bit. That's okay, I'll correct it right now. So that's essentially the front of my bookshelf. I'm going to go ahead and draw in the different aspects of it. You know, it's got some depth on the other side. It's not just going to run at the edge of the paper and be done. Okay. Now what I can do is I can draw in the idea of where these bookshelves are, the different shelves, and I can draw in, you know, knickknackies or books or whatever on the bookshelves. If I want to, I could fill it with the thing. If I really wanted to make this even crazier, I can make this a 3-dimensional thing. But for this instance today, I'm not going to do that. I'm only going to come with this bookshelf and say that it's going to be, I'm only going to make it 1 foot deep on either side. So 1 foot on this side. I'm going to add 1 foot to this side. Okay. So when you're thinking about furniture or anything like that, you have to just kind of think about the best way to flatten it out. If you were to take that whole piece, sit it on the ground and just flatten it out, where does all this have to go? Now, the last thing I need to add on here is I need to add a 1 foot tall top to this particular bookshelf. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go from each of those wings that I created on here just for, it's going to be more than I need, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it anyway. So you should have something that kind of looks similar to this. So this, and this are the pieces we're going to score over and fold it to give it thickness. This is going to be the frontage that we'll actually see. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is add a bit of a tab along the bottom so I can glue it onto the model box if I decide to glue it. So now I'm just going to come in here. I should have been drawing with one full straight edge, but I haven't been. So I'm going to come in here and just find the nice, clean, straight edge that I can. Slice this guy off. Okay. Come back in here. Slice off that piece. I don't really need, oh, my paper didn't cut all the way through. My blade might be getting dull, which can make it harder to cut. Okay, I'm going to clean up this line that I've already cut just because it's kind of, there we go. All right, so now remember the next step of everything I'm going to do is I'm always going to score it. So I'm realizing now that I don't need this extra piece on the top. I'm going to actually cut it here. But what I'm going to do is add a bit of a tab to the top of each of these sides of the bookcase. Okay, and I'm going to score those. I'm going to score along the bottom edge where the top goes. I'm also going to need to just cut those off because I'm not going to need those on the bottom. Okay. So I've cut them off and I'm just going to score everything now along all 4 sides of this bookshelf. Now, as I fold it all together, and I've scored those top sections. So as I fold it, I can score down these little tabs that I've created everywhere. So what I've done on the top with these tabs is I've given myself something to glue the top piece of the bookshelf to. So now I can just go ahead and glue all of this together. Okay, a couple of tabs I glued. I'll fold them back, fold the top down. Now what I can do is put this down here, and I can use my X-Acto blade to push them down together until they're stable enough that I can move them. If you get glue on your cutting mat, make sure you wipe it off as fast as you can. You don't want globs of glue getting built up on there. I used to borrow my wife's cutting mat, but she made me buy my own because I kept getting glue and stuff on it. She didn't like that, so I had to go buy my own one day. Okay, great. So now I've got this bookshelf, and now the last thing I can do is I've created a tab on the bottom, and I can either glue it with my tab, or I can just completely remove the tab and just set it into the space. Because let's say the director doesn't like the bookshelf. If I don't glue it in and it's just sitting in there like this, I can easily take that back out. So let me lift this up and I'll show you guys my whole ground plan that I've got so far. So this is all what I've created in a matter of 38 minutes for the director to look at. I could go continue on breaking things down like, building, tables and rugs and that kind of stuff. As far as the rug goes, that's the easiest thing to do. I'm just going to lay this piece of paper down. Bristol board is what it's called. It's paper. I'm just going to make a couple of marks on here. All I've done is put little tiny tick marks in there that I can just come straight down with. So if I find my straight edge, okay, on that one, and then find the tick mark I put on this one. Come down here. I've got essentially I've got the carpet that I laid out. Now if I wanted to draw some design into it, maybe the carpet's got some border along the outside. All that's going on in my head now is magic carpet ride on from Aladdin. A whole new world. There you go. That's my beautiful singing. There's a reason I do tech theater and not acting. It's because of that. I'm just going to quickly draw in a little bit of detail for this rug. Whatever rug I've decided I like. And then if I put that on the ground plan, it's now sitting in the space as if it's part of that particular drawing now too. Another thing I could do on the ground plan if I really wanted to, and I would have done this before the walls came in, like let's say this isn't like a carpet and it's wood grain or wood. You can go in and draw in your wood planks beforehand so you can start to now see how the wood planks might show up underneath it. If I lay the carpet down here, then as I build the next several pieces of furniture, I can put it on top of it. So we've got time. I can show you guys how to break down a chair. The chairs can be a bit more complicated, but you have to just kind of think about it as if you're gonna, set a chair on the ground and squash it. So just keep that in mind. So the first thing I'm gonna do is figure out the base of my chair. I'm just gonna make my chair a 2 foot by 2 foot square because they're soft, cozier chairs. They're not like rock hard chairs. So I'm going to come in here 2 foot. I need to give myself space for this one. I can't do it along the edge. So keep that in mind. You need space to do this particular one because you're going to have to build its legs and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to just make myself a nice 2 foot square down along the whole thing. Okay, so that's essentially the section where my butt would go. That's the part I would sit on. Okay, and so since I'm making these kind of like an armchair style rather than chairs with legs, what I need to do now is on the sides where the arms are, I just need to decide how tall the arm section is. Okay, so I've decided on that, which is completely arbitrary, and I don't know how to make it match to the side, so I should probably measure it out. Okay, we're going to go 1/2 a foot tall. Okay, and then over here, another 1/2 a foot tall. Connect the dots. Great. So now what I need to do is figure out how wide it's going to be. And again, maybe I'll just go with another 1/2 a foot, keep it nice and consistent across the board. This is going to make a whole lot of sense what I'm doing here in a minute. So I'll try to explain it here before I cut it out and fold it so that so you guys can kind of see what I'm doing. So this is the spot where you sit. This is the vertical spot that comes up the sides. And this is the part where you put your arms on, or where your dog or cat would sit on, okay? So then what I need to do on the other side is figure out how tall this whole chair is going to be on the end. So if my butt needs to sit at 2 feet, I need to come up 2 feet from there, but I also need to take into account the extra height that I added from this section and this section. So if I want my chair to sit, I'm going to say I want the section where my butt sits to be at 2.5. And actually write that down so I don't forget it. 2.5 is where I want my butt to sit. So I need to come down at least 2.5. Okay, but now I need to take into account this extra width that I put here. So I need to add on an extra 1/2 inch. So I need to make this a total of 3 feet on the outside. And again, I promise you this will make some sense in a minute here after we finish this whole chair, which is why I also said you need lots of room to make chairs. You can't just start on the edge of a paper for a clean line. You have to start at a place you can make sense. All right, so now I need to do the back of the chair. So this is a side, this is a side, this is going to be the back side, and this is going to be the front side. All right, the front side's the easy one, 2.5, done. Okay, so I'm going to come here and I'm going to make 2.5 coming down and 2.5 coming down, done, perfect. That's the easy one. Now the back one is a bit more tricky because I need to take into account that I want it to be 2.5, but I also need to take into account where I want the back to be. So 5 feet tall is really tall for a chair. So maybe I need the whole thing to be 3.5. Just an arbitrary number that I'm picking. And that puts me, well, really close. I have just enough paper to do a 3 foot tall back, okay? So now essentially what I've done is I've created a chair, and you're gonna see how this all fits together in just a minute, okay? I need to create a tab, as long as I thought this through the right way. I need a tab there and there. And I think I'm gonna need a tab along the back edges. This is gonna be really embarrassing if this doesn't work out when I do it. Okay, so here's essentially what I've gotten so far. You got the back, you have the front down here, and you got the 2 sides in the section where your bum sits. If I cut this out and fold it, score it all in the right way, I should be able to glue this together and have a chair. So give me just a minute here, we'll cut it out and I'll start to fold it and see how well my planning has worked out. Hopefully it worked out. These kind of armchairs are harder than just normal chairs with legs, but these are nicer looking and easier to sit on. All right, so I'm gonna cut out all these pieces. I won't need those. I won't need these. I definitely won't need that section. And I won't need there, theoretically. All right, so this is what we're looking at, oh dear, right now. That's exactly what we're looking at, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is just start scoring. I'm gonna score the front edge, okay? Now, I folded down the front so we can see how this would sit on the ground that way. I'm gonna go ahead and score the back side of where the armchair section goes, because I need to fold it forward here and here. I have all these extra tabs that I need to trim off so that when I fold it. Okay, so we've got the front edge that's folded down. We've started to make the 2 sides, okay? Now I'm gonna score along here because now I need to fold this in the opposite direction. to fold down like that. Okay. And then I need to actually score the back sides of these ones to fold them going in the other direction. Okay. I made my marks. I'm going to flip it over, score in between the two. Oh, I scored on the wrong side. Dang it. Really is not very fun when you score on the wrong side, because then you have to rescore and try to fold it without breaking it. So that's not cool. But I just did that. I've been doing this for many, many years, and I still score the wrong side of the paper a lot. So don't worry if you do it too. I'm trying to cut out this extra bit of tab that I don't need. It's getting in the way as I fold it. All right, well, it's not going to be pretty, but it'll work. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and score the tabs that I put along the front side so that I can fold them back 1 and 2, because they are now going to glue to the front edge of what I've done over here. And then the last thing I'm going to do is score. Oh, see, this part's coming off. I scored it and I ruined it. Dang it. I'm kind of sad about that. Dang it. We'll see if we can glue it back together. All right. Now, that one's going to be a little tricky too, because that's where I messed up on the scoring. If I throw a little dollop of glue on here, I did not account for the extra width of the arm, but we'll make it work. I'm just going to glue them together. What I needed to do on the front edge there is I needed to account for the extra width for the arm part that was folding out, which I didn't, and that's okay. I think we'll still be able to make it work. And I think you guys got the idea of what I was doing when I was laying out the paper and breaking down the chair into its individual pieces. This whole chair is just falling apart. But anyway, you get the idea of how it would go together had I not scored them on the wrong side and made it fall apart. You get the idea of how this whole thing would have then folded together to make the chair, and 3.5 feet on the back is really tall, so maybe it didn't need to be that way either. All you're doing when you're making the chairs is breaking them down into their simple state. Let me grab an example of a different chair that I've already made in the past, and you'll kind of see what I'm talking about when you fold them all together. So when you fold them all together and you cut them the right way, you get chairs that can actually, take the shape of a chair. Here's a jukebox that I created for something else. Here are some rounded top cafe style tables. This one's starting to fall apart, but basically I made, I gotta get the camera. Basically, I made some cuts in there, put them together, glued them together, and a little bit of detail into it. Some of this other stuff was, here's a fireplace that I made out of, this was some balsa wood on the inside, and then actually color printed paper on the outside with a mantelpiece on the top. So you can start to see how some of these can take shape. And the last thing you always need in your white model box is a human foot character. I make them all at 6 foot scale. When I put them in the model box, that way it kind of gives me a reference. Most actors are not going to be, roughly not too much taller than 6 feet. So if I have 6 feet, it's a good base to start off of. So they should always be sitting inside of your model too. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up because we're running out of time. And I was kind of bummed that my chair fell apart. So you guys couldn't see the magic of what the chair could be. We'll have to just throw it away. You guys can work on breaking it down on your own. So here's our white model. This is how it's now going to fit into the lyric box that I had created previously. So when you put that in there and it lays into the space, you can now start to, get an impression of how your model is going to look to your teacher or to your director. That keeps wanting to pop out, or to your director or whatever in the future. And you guys can start to have conversations about heights of walls, start to have conversations about how things are fitting together, or other visual things that you want. So if you're looking down from above, it's kind of starting to look like you can fill the space. You're going to kind of start to look at things like, oh, maybe we need to have some masking up in here, or what are we going to do behind that space where there's windows? Or do we need to add masking for when this door opens up? That kind of a thing. So moving this from a ground plan that you sketched out to a whole different version with three-dimensionality begins to strike up a great conversation with your director and fellow designers about things. Let me go ahead and take my phone off, and I'll walk you guys over here. I'm going to show you one example of another more complicated white model that I've made. Sorry, bear with me, guys. This whole new technology age. All right, sorry, I'm back, guys. That was bad. This whole new technology thing that we're doing this right now is kind of new to all of us. So here's an example of a white model that I made. This is for 12th night. You can kind of see how detailed this one got to help the director out. There's, and you can start to see how you can take your white model, move it into a color phase, tip it this way so we can kind of see the whole thing. We had a lot of different things that we worked with on this one. And then to make the stairs down here, I just used white foam core to put those onto it. Here's an example of another white model that I had made for another show a while ago called 3 Days of Rain, which we did a couple of years ago here at Idaho State. I think that's really all my white models. The rest of them have turned into color. And you could take your white models and turn them into color. This was me starting to experiment with how to 3D print white models, which is turning out pretty cool. I just haven't taken the time to glue it all together nor print all the pieces, but it's kind of a newer phase thing. And there's a color model. So this one was done complete with Bristol board, and then I printed on the Bristol board with color, and then I cut it out. So you guys can kind of see how moving into that phase can be kind of nice. I really hope you guys enjoyed this demonstration today. I enjoyed putting it together. I wish we could be in person. And next year, I'm hoping we'll all be back together here at the Stevens Performing Arts Center to join in for the 10-Minute Play Festival, because I would love to see you guys again. I've missed having this particular phase in the thing that we're doing. So I'm really glad that you guys can join me today. I hope that you guys get a chance to watch this and can benefit from it. And I look forward to seeing you guys soon. Reach out to me if you guys have any questions. You guys can get access to my email and reach out. I appreciate everything.